Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Up now, we have Meet the United Inventors Association Toy Hub. I'll hand the session over to Matt Nuccio. Matt?
Well, thank all of you for coming. I appreciate your time and hopefully your patience. But we are the United Inventors Association, which is a nonprofit which is here to educate and advocate for inventors. And I sit on the executive board. We have a very large following around the country. We're free to join, so please go to the UIAUSA.org. There's plenty of information to help inventors navigate safely through the terrain of licensing and self-producing your own products. So that being said, aside from that, I own a design development company called Design Edge. We work with many companies throughout here. I also help set up Creative Factor. So from there, I'm going to ask Elizabeth to introduce herself and tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Sure, happy to do so, and thank you for that kind introduction, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here at the Toy Fair, to be here on this esteemed panel. And I've got to call out the patent pending t-shirt in the audience. This is someone who has been to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Only available at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. As Matt said, my name is Elizabeth Dougherty. I am a 30-plus year veteran of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Started my career as a U.S. patent examiner. That's right, that's what we look like. We are the unicorns of the STEM field. Served in a variety of capacities at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, including doing legal policy work. But really, the joy and pleasure of my career is what I've been able to do in the last few years and what I do currently. And that is, I serve as the Eastern Regional Outreach Director, which, as I like to say, it's really just a long way of saying that my team and I help people. We're specifically charged with helping people, stakeholders on the East Coast, but yet have the opportunity to interact with stakeholders worldwide. So it's a pleasure to be here today on behalf of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, helping our inventors, innovators, and entrepreneurs protect their intellectual property, demystify and understand the process, and also to seek your feedback as stakeholders. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we're honored to have you here. And to her left is Mr. Dougal Grimes.
Hello, everyone, and happy Toy Fair, I guess. And my name's Dougal Grimes. I started in the toy and game industry in 2008 with Hasbro and did many different roles within Hasbro, moved back over to the USA, and then in 2019 joined Spin Master, which is a children's entertainment company, global children's entertainment company. And I'm currently the Vice President of Inventor Relations and Innovation, which effectively is a function of R&D. So looking at new ideas, reviewing them, partnering with inventors, innovators like many in the audience here around the world with the aim of creating new, exciting toy and game products. Yeah, so welcome.
Thank you, Dougal. Trina?
My name is not on the slide, so I'm Trina McFarland. I'm the owner and general manager of TinkerTini, which helps manufacturers connect with inventors. I've been, like Dougal, in the inventor relations role for most of my career, starting with Disney, Jakks Pacific, Fisher-Price, Mattel, and then I went on to start my own company, TinkerTini, and we've had a lot of success helping inventors find homes for their concepts. And yeah, I'm really happy to be on the advisory board for the Toy Hub and helping get free resources and education out to inventors to find the right homes for their babies. So happy to be here.
Well, thank you, Trina. And last but not least, Scott.
Yeah, I think the lawyer's always least.
Yes, yes.
So my name's
No,
Scott.
not when it comes to invoicing.
So my name's Scott Landsbaum. I'm an independent attorney. I've been working in the toy industry for 25 years now. I got my start at a company that made all of Burger King's premiums, and I've had my own shop for the last 20 years, and I work with toy companies and inventors. Toy companies, I do sort of soup to nuts, from startup to large company, everything that you need to do business-wise, business deals. I do some IP trademarks, but lots of licensing, inventions, entertainment, distribution agreements, everything you need to get up and running. And we on the United Inventors Association, we're just trying to help people grow, whether that's sort of in inventing and licensing your concepts or starting your own company and growing, because we want more toy companies.
Absolutely. So with that, I'm going to have a couple of questions here, which are pretty common questions that we get. But from there, we'll open the floor up to questions. So if you got something brewing, hold on to it, and we will let you ask the esteemed panel here. But I guess, Dougal, you look primed for answering this sort of a question here.
Okay. Primed, all right.
Yeah. Do all toy companies look at inventions?
Ooh, good question. I wouldn't say, it's not a sweeping statement to say that all toy companies look at inventions. It's very, let me wind back. The toy and game industry traditionally does have a very long tradition of working with inventors, external inventors, creators. This does come from a time when obviously I think the toy industry was in its infancy, and I don't think that toy design really was a thing. Like I think back in the, let's say the 30s and 40s, 50s, being a toy designer probably wasn't really a job role. Most people were, engineers or automotive engineers and things like that. So it came from a time where people who were creating these were specialists, and they were outside of the company. So early invention companies such as Marvin Glass from Chicago, if you don't know who they are, you should read up on the history. They were specialists in creating playthings, toys, games, and then companies would go to them, and then the model of licensing their concepts came in. And that was built into the toy and game industry from a very early start. And I think for smaller companies, it's very important, because if you have lack of resources and specialties such as invention or design, you can work with partners like inventors and, have ideas, but not even that, advance your ideas with someone who's maybe an electrical engineer or however they want to do it, a copywriter. So you'd work with these people to develop your ideas. But to say that all companies work with inventors wouldn't be totally true. I would say that there are companies that maybe don't for whatever reason, but I think everyone's probably very open about the fact whether they do or they're not doing it at this moment in time. So I think the best is to get in touch with that company, see if they have a policy that is looking at inventors, open innovation, it's sometimes called many different ways, and just see.
Well, thank you. Anyone want to elaborate upon his short explanation?
No, I was just going to say that I think for me the answer is no, not all companies work with inventors, and that could be for a variety of reasons. Sometimes manufacturers have products that just do not lend towards, invention, like I think Lego is a good example, where there's just not a lot of feature and mechanism and novelty, and it's pretty hard to compete with the expertise that's inside Lego. But I think the right thing if you're an inventor looking to find a home for your product is to just ask that company, do you accept outside submissions? And then just please don't write executives on LinkedIn or go around side doors. We don't typically appreciate that. But no, not all companies accept inventor submissions.
Well, thank you very much. To our next question, and Scott, I'll direct this to you. It's, what is the difference between licensing and self-producing?
Well, the basic difference is if you're licensing your invention, then you're basically giving it to another company to develop and market and sell, and they will take all of the risk and do all the investment in that, and they will basically control the development of your item. In exchange for that, they will keep the lion's share of the profit and pay you a smaller royalty on sales. And so if you don't have the expertise or the finances to do that, or don't want to because it's a big heavy lift, then licensing for you is the way to go. If you feel really confident in your concept and you have the time and the money and the energy to do it, then you want to start your own toy company, and you go out and get help and get some direction in terms of sort of manufacturing and marketing, and set up your company, and these days it's not easy, but it's never been easier to take your concept directly to consumers, right? Because with social media and Amazon, you can just do it. You can start your company, you can find a factory, make your stuff, and start selling directly. So you don't need to have all those layers of approval of getting into a physical store. So a lot of it comes down to what resources you have and then what personally you want to do.
Yeah.
Yes, you can also build a company to flip it. So I see that more and more. People will sort of seed a company, they'll get a line going, they'll get some distribution, they'll get into a couple of strong retailers, have a track record, and then they can go to a larger toy company to either take it over or fund them or joint venture. Anyone want to expand on anything?
I was just going to say that I think it's great that there's more paths to market these days. And I think one important thing is any creator, if you're going to self-launch or try to license, the first question you should start out with is like sort of who you are and what makes you happy and what you enjoy. Either you're a creator and you love to create and you're just going to create and you want to hand them off, or you're someone that creates something and you want to run and build a business. Those are two very different personality types and skill sets. So it's really good to have that heart-to-heart with yourself before you get on a path that may not be very satisfying or a surprise down the road.
Yeah, to Trina's point, I think that self-assessment is very critical because all too often we've all heard those horror stories of someone who ends up with 100,000 widgets in their garage because the entrepreneurial side of the adventure is not in their wheelhouse. Because oftentimes inventing and running a business are two very, very different things, and sometimes those paths don't cross. So that self-analysis, I think, is really critical.
And sometimes the product's terrible.
There is that.
But I can add to the flip side of that because on behalf of a client, I was approaching a smaller company about potentially buying them, and our pitch was to the guy, it's like, look, we'll take over all that stuff. We'll take over the operations and the distribution and the marketing, and you can go back to pure creation. And the guy was like, no, I don't want to do that. I like all this stuff. I like the operations, all this stuff. I love having my own company. So it just works both ways. Whatever really suits your personality.
Anyone?
Yeah, I was just thinking that it ties in and builds on what you were saying, Trina, is being self-aware about your skill set and your experience, and bringing on partners, be that a big manufacturing giant to do certain things. But I think it's very important as creators to really be as self-aware as you can of your abilities and the extent you have and where you can excel and where you can bring people on board to partner with you and help and amplify that. And that just comes with the understanding of what you really want to do. And the most successful things I've seen happen within the toy and game industry have been when people partner and they know their complementary skills, be it single person and a giant company or just common inventors knowing each other. So it's very important.
I think part of this conversation is also knowing when to ask for help. And whether it's reaching out to a federal agency, a state or local agency, or an organization like the United Inventors Association, knowing when you don't know what you don't know and looking for help. Because there are resources out there, many of which are free, that are available. Again, whether it's through your small business development center in your local community or some other, channel. Again, just being here today, you've connected with quite a few of them.
It's very good. So, interestingly enough, I was in a conversation with Liz yesterday. I was introducing her to somebody who was seeing if their product could be patented. And traditionally in the toy industry, patents aren't always necessary, but they are fantastic to have. But I was sort of blown away when you were explaining the different types of patents. In particular, this person, she was like, maybe the idea itself couldn't be patented, but it as a kit could be. Could you elaborate on that, if at all?
Sure, I'd be happy to do so. So there are three basic types of patents: utility patents, design patents, and plant patents. Looking at where we're at today, let's put plant patents aside. Incredibly valuable, incredibly beautiful, but not our topic of conversation today. Most people in the toy industry are looking for either or both a utility patent and or a design patent. The utility patent protecting the functionality, the method of manufacture, the article of manufacture itself. You may also be looking at a design patent, which protects the ornamental appearance of the article of manufacture. And oftentimes your IP portfolio may contain one or both of those or multiple forms of those covering one type of item. Now, what Matt's referring to is a conversation I had yesterday with a remarkable toy designer in our area of the exhibit floor, who is doing something which would qualify as a crafting kit. Let's put it that way. The invention has several different parts to it, which would arrive to the purchaser, the end user, and the end user would then assemble those parts to create and have the experience of the toy. So there are opportunities. There is a very specific area at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office for the examination of kits. And kits often come in the area, again, of crafting or in educational materials. It's where you may be taking known pieces, known goods, and assembling them together in such a way that the end user has this compilation of products that are then used to create some type of new and unique piece of goods. You can find information both on our website about kit patents as well as a simple internet search can lead you to a lot of conversations about patenting kits.
Thank you. That was an excellent answer and very educational. Scott, I'd like to ask you the importance of trademarks within the toy industry.
Well, I would say they're exceptionally important, particularly if you're planning on starting your own company. A lot of the value of that company is going to be in your brand name and the goodwill. And I think one of the mistakes people make is not figuring that name out sooner rather than later. Because I so often get a call from someone saying, "Oh, I'm just about to submit, my factory order, and I wanted to double check the name." And like 5 minutes of searching reveals a conflict. It's really something that's important to have and check before you start doing your packaging design and paying people to tool stuff with that name engraved in it, because a lot of the value of your company will be in that brand name, unless sometimes you come up with a name and it's just you want to use it because it just describes exactly what the product is, and you think that's what you need to get on shelf and get attention, and it might be totally unprotectable, but from a marketing perspective, it works. So I personally feel like those situations are pretty rare, and maybe they're good for an item, but if you're really going to start a company, you want to have a name that you can own and then later sell.
Yeah, if you walk around this building, brands are super important, right? It's not just like Cabbage Patch isn't just a doll. There's all sorts of sets. There's all sorts of accessories. It goes into different categories. Barbie being another great example. And there are times when the trademark is worth more than the original invention. And I've done licensing deals on that. So anyone want to elaborate on anything?
Yeah, I'll just say from the invention licensing side of things, trademarks, they're not that expensive. And a lot of inventor concepts come in the door and they're transforming vehicle version 3.2. So, and then sometimes something will come in with a beautiful name that just explains the concept. And there have been a few licensing deals where I did include, they happen to have secured a trademark on this great name that described their concept they're trying to license. And I did include the trademark in the licensing deal, which helped me sort of hold higher deal terms. So trademarks can be used that way too in the invention licensing model, if you have a great name that really explains your product.
When talking about that IP portfolio, we recognize that oftentimes that can be the most valuable form of intellectual property that a company has. We like to say that while perhaps not everyone is making something that is protectable by a patent, nearly every small business, every endeavor has something that's protectable by a trademark. Anecdotally, they say we interact with approximately 1,500 trademarks on any given day. Now, I don't know, I think if you're walking the floor at the toy fair, you're probably interacting with a lot more than 1,500. But that indicator of the source of goods and services is so incredibly valuable. I can't more strongly urge what Scott has already said to do a trademark search. And I would encourage you using the USPTO's search database for trademarks or using one of our patent and trademark office resource centers where we have trained librarians who can help you do a high-quality patent or trademark search. Why not save yourself the headache, the heartache, and the financial outlay because your idea might be just so good somebody's already thought of it.
I don't think a lot of people realize that the USPTO does have regional offices around the country. They're not just located down in Washington, D.C. You can actually get a hold of somebody in your area and speak with them.
That is correct, Matt. We have a regional office in Detroit, Denver, Dallas, and San Jose. And then, again, of course, our headquarters, which is in Alexandria, Virginia. And we additionally have these over 80 patent and trademark resource centers, which are librarians positioned at free libraries across the nation, primarily in academic and university settings. And these librarians are there to help you.
Well, I think we should do a tour of all the USPTO locations. That sounds really fun. That sounds cool. But also, just on that trademark part, it's not unique to the toy and game industry that the trademark and the name would be the most important thing. And just as a side note to this, we actually use name storming, as we'd call it, as something that would inform a product. We were talking all about this earlier, and a lot of the time is because the trademark is such a protectable part of what we do in our business, and because it's such a powerful thing, we use that as part of the creation process. We start with a name, which happens a lot of the time. We just launched a game called Tell Me Without Telling Me, which is actually a meme-style saying. And when we were doing this process and we had the name and we were working with the inventors, we used the USPTO's test system, and it was like, hang on a second, this is not trademarked. And then, interestingly, the name of that informed what the gameplay would be, Tell Me Without Telling Me. So it's interesting that you can use it as something that starts part of your creative process and part of R&D, as well as being a very important part of your, I guess, your business strategy as well.
Well, thank you. I have more questions, but we are also getting low on time, so I'd like to open up to some questions within the audience. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask any of these panelists here? No, apparently nobody likes you guys.
Don't be shy.
Here we go. Wait, we have a microphone coming to the young man in blue on the front row.
What would be the big difference, speaking on trademarks, between supplemental and regular trademark?
So there's different sort of types of trademarks. So there's something called they're called being put on registers. So something that gets on the principal register, that would be sort of Coca-Cola, just some name that's not really descriptive of what the item is. So sometimes what happens is you get a name and it's sort of descriptive of what the item is, but not completely generic. So you're not trying to register car for selling cars, because that is completely unregisterable. I'm just trying to, I can't think of a good example, but so if you have something that is sort of semi-descriptive of what the product actually is, you wind up on something called the supplemental register. And what the supplemental register is, it gets you sort of less enforcement rights, but you still get your sort of circle R to put on the packaging. You still have some enforcement rights, but it's just not as strong and it's not as good. You have the opportunity after like 5 years of use and showing, look, we've been using it for 5 years. People now like really associate this product with our name with this. So it's better than nothing. It's not as great, if that makes sense.
We'd certainly want to encourage you to go for the strongest trademark possible. And the strongest trademarks possible are those that are fanciful, words that have no other meaning than serving as your trademark. Think of words like Xerox, Cisco, Exxon. These words have no meaning.
Dougal.
Thank you.
Could I file a trademark?
And the next strongest type of trademark is those that are arbitrary. So think of things like Apple, Gap, BlackBerry. They are real words in our English language, but yet when used as a trademark, they represent something very different than the word as it is known in common language.
Excellent. Any other questions from the audience? It's a tough crowd. Trina, Dougal, I'd like to ask you guys, where do you draw the line, or a line, between an idea versus an invention?
Wow, this is a big one.
Go for it.
A lot of these things can get used interchangeably in what we do for work, and concept, idea, invention. For me, an invention holds something that feels novel, or something that feels new in a certain sense. And for what I feel like when I see an invention, and as an inventor comes to me, and you show an invention, it's like, wow, you get that initial feeling, I haven't seen this before. And of course, like, it's hard because there's so many things out in the world and so many people creating. But in our knowledge of what we're doing and the experience of things that are out there, it feels like something's quite new. And within that, there is also something that feels relatively tangible, again, for the toy and game industry, whereby we could potentially take this and expand upon it into a product. I'd say the difference between that and just an idea, I'll give an example. I use this one. It's the difference between someone coming to me with a sketch of a hoverboard, the famous one from Back to the Future 2, and they've got a sketch and they're like, oh, wow, look, there's someone floating on a skateboard. You're like, yeah, it's a good idea, great idea. How do you do this? Like, and, you know, a lot of times people, they don't go to that extreme, but there's various forms of that. Versus someone coming to me with an invention and saying, oh, I have this electromagnetic system that manages to hover X amount of weight. You're like, wow, that's the invention here. So that's how I kind of discern between it. There's nothing wrong with the idea. It just needs to evolve more into that state where there is actually something that is the tangible nature. But
I tend to tell everyone there's really no shortage of ideas. We see ideas all the time. But when you go to an inventor relations team, you need a solution, right? So
Yeah.
solutions are what they're looking for at the end of the day.
So I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I've licensed hundreds and hundreds of inventions. I have not once licensed an idea. Companies do not license ideas. They have no shortage of ideas. They have internal design and development teams that can come up with ideas all day. What they are lacking is the proof of concept and at least the beginnings of the execution of an idea. So sell sheets are, I know some people don't want to hear this, they are almost worthless when it comes to licensing invention.
I like to say sell sheets, sell shit.
Sell sheets, sell, ooh, feisty. No, but you know, it's, if you're going to spend your time and your resources on something, and I think just the process of working into 3D will help you refine your ideas by the nature of it. It's very easy to draw or sketch something or do something, you know, with a augmented reality model, but once it's in scale and you play with it, it will by nature, I think, refine itself, and then you come to people like Dougal and I with a more well thought out concept where the team doesn't have to lift so much internally. So companies love the practical assistance from inventors when it comes to product development, not ideas. Does that help?
Yeah, I will say from the patent application perspective, one cannot patent an idea. One must be in such possession of the invention that you can describe it with such specificity that others can make and use your invention. That's what's required when you submit a patent application. So I always like to use the example that I have a great idea. I want a time machine so I can go back in time and meet remarkable people like Abraham Lincoln. Do I have an invention? No, I don't know the first thing about developing the technology to time travel. The corollary question I always get from inventors, though, is does that require that I have a working prototype in order to file a patent application? And the answer is no. You must just be able to describe in a patent application with that specificity in order to apply for a patent.
That being said, because by nature of my company, we do development for a lot of companies, sometimes I run into an issue when someone comes to me with a patent. of something that's never been prototyped. And in the prototyping process, we discover major problems or things that can't be done or things that make it so cost prohibitive that the patent actually becomes a detriment and not really worth that much. So I do recommend, and you can use NDAs or whatever, but you work with someone who actually understands whatever, like here are toys, you work with a proper toy designer to analyze your product, make sure it's not only functions right, but it can be made at a cost-effective level before you fully file, and then this way, whatever you file is whatever you're going to make. Is there more questions? Oh, yes, here we go.
For new inventors and startup companies through the government, are there any grants currently available? Because patents tend to be really expensive.
So the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office does not have grant-making authority. What we do have, however, as a result of the America Invents Act of 2011, we have stood up across the nation a network of patent pro bono programs, which are helping financially under-resourced inventors make sure that they don't leave fantastic inventions on the garage workbench or the kitchen table because they can't afford a patent attorney. These are available in both a regional basis, on a state basis. You can find the information on our website, and I'm happy to share with you. We've also stood up a corollary to that, which is we have also worked with law schools across the nation to stand up law school clinic programs where we are both training the next generation of IP professionals, but also enhancing and increasing the amount of free legal services. And the law school clinics work both in the area of patents and trademarks, whereas the patent pro bono program, as the name suggests, only provides free legal services in the area of patents.
Thank you. Got another question here? She's got sorry, Chris, please.
Yeah, so I really appreciate the question about licensing versus self-producing, but I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on different types of licensing deals, specifically if, perhaps your invention could be made in multiple different ways. How would you handle something like that?
Well, when in inventor relations in the toy business, typically we're not dealing so much with patents because we're very used to licensing things without patents. So usually it's a license that's defined by a concept description with reference to the prototype in the exhibit. But there are licenses that will include rights to formulations. There are also patent licenses, which we can include. And then there are trademark licenses, and then there are, I guess, like more entertainment licenses.
Let me ask you a question. We're just trying to do some sort of splicing thing, as they call it. Are you looking to use the same technology across different industries, or are you thinking you can license that to several companies in some sort of way? What's your... Hold on, she's going to give you the mic. Sorry.
Is this thing on? Okay, cool.
Yes.
So if something like there's a larger invention, but there are maybe different niches that it could go into. Yeah.
So most license agreements we have can be broken down by categories or by territory. So you could license something specific to the toy industry and leave other industries open for you to license elsewhere, or you can license it by territory. There's many ways that you can sort of slice the pie, so to speak. So if you have like a platform technology or something with various applications, try to sort of make it as focused as possible with who you're licensing it to.
Yeah, I'll give you a big it depends, because it depends on sort of like what the different verticals are that you're looking at and how related they are or not. So most larger toy companies, when they license an invention, they want rights to everything because they're envisioning the potential that your invention might become something big, that is going to be the next Paw Patrol or something. And so then they're going to want it for, clothing and bedding and backpacks and those things. If it's more of a sort of technology and you're like, well, look, there's a toy application for this and a hardware application for this, then you have a greater potential to sort of segment those markets and license individually. So a lot of it depends just on what it is and how related the different items are.
And I'll add a little something there. If you're looking to license to a company, and you should be understanding of what their strengths are. So, for example, when my former company, Hasbro, do something like a Transformers, but Hasbro, you want it to go to that level where it's like a big global brand, and then underneath there, as Scott's saying, bedding and toys and games, and if you think about all the categories there are, you could walk through this entire building and see visually what categories there are, costume and all that stuff. Main companies will look for that because they do all those things. But you may just be dealing with potentially a board game publisher, and that is all they do. And I think it's down to yourself, of course, to decide on, I will just, in our contract, specifically say this company has the rights to do board games and associated. And even within board games, it keeps going. People can categorize it in many different ways, but I'd say the company you're working with, look at their abilities and what they do, what their vision is for your item, and you can tweak it as per how that works.
Good question.
Hi. I wanted to ask, aside from trademarks and patents, would copyrights also be a good option for some ideas?
Well, I mean, copyright applies to sort of creative, artistic things. So it just depends on what you're doing. If you're doing something like a doll line or something, that's
Game instructions, I think, is very particularly important.
Well, so game instructions for copyright are sort of difficult because useful things cannot be copyrighted, but like your game board can be. So copyright, it just depends on what the item is. If you're doing, again, like a doll line where it's mostly the visual appearance that matters, then copyright can be very, very important. Copyright is very easily, like you're protected by copyright the moment you ink it out on paper, but to sue anybody, you need to register it with the Copyright Office, which is very inexpensive, by the way, much less so than trademarks or copyrights. So if you're doing something like that, copyright is very important.
Anyone else have questions? Oh. Sure, you can.
Hey everybody, my name is Chris Landano. I run the New York City Inventors and Entrepreneurs Club, and we run a club under the UIA. In regards to grants, there are small business innovation research through the government programs. I'll be here after we're finished if anyone has any questions.
Sure. Anyone else have any questions?
Come on, one more.
Oh, here we go.
I have a question regarding patents. So we have patents both in the U.S. and other jurisdictions, and we found that there are very different rules in different countries. And in China, for example, there is something that's called the utility model patent, which is a patent that is granted without any sort of substantial examination. So is there an optimal strategy for where to file first, how to file it, using PCTs, design patents, or anything like that?
I'll leave that to the experts.
Scott.
An optimal strategy is it just depends so much on what you're doing and where you're selling. It's just sort of a really impossible question to answer in the abstract. I mean, because first you have to answer the base question of is it worth doing a patent on this item, and what is it, and then do you just want a patent in China to protect the manufacturing, or where is your big market going to be? Where do you think the knockoffs are going to be? How strong is the patent? How easy is it to design around? That you really need to get into the weeds to figure that out.
And will you defend it? Is it even worth it?
And how much money you have to do it.
Do we have?
We're
there's
still
another question.
waiting. We're still waiting for that worldwide patent. I don't know if we'll see it in any of our lifetimes.
So once you do get a trademark or copyright, the trademark only allows you to defend it. You, in your experience, the attorney, how often do you just send a non-disclosure, or not a non-disclosure, but a cease and desist letter? And how often does that work versus you have to roll up your sleeves and start suing these people?
50% of the time it works.
Actually, it's 50.1%. Again, it's one of those things where it really depends on the circumstances. I've had a number of situations where, particularly like sometimes you get like fan art or things like that, and people who are really not intending to be nefarious about anything, and they didn't realize that you even had a trademark or things like that, and usually that can solve the issues. Sometimes you get people who generally tend to be either they're knocking you off and they know they're knocking you off and they're China based or something and they don't care, or they're a larger company and they see some flaw with your trademark and they're willing to invest in litigation to do it. So I again, those types of questions you can't answer unless you know the specifics of what's going on.
Well, with that, I'm sorry.
One follow-up question. When it comes to someone who's trying to license a product, meeting with a company like Spin Master or somebody else, when it comes to signing non-disclosure agreements, how solid are those?
Well, submitting, so that they could tell you, like if you're submitting to a major company that has an invention relations program, they will have their very own submission agreement. You're not going to get a standard non-disclosure agreement with them. With other companies, when you sign non-disclosure agreements, it all comes down to what the agreement says and what you showed, and whether what you showed them really was confidential or not, really was novel. If you're showing them something that really is out there on the market, there's no confidentiality. If you're showing them something that really is a novel invention and it was confidential, and then they turn around and they take it and start making a product, your contract should work.
Well, on that note, we are out of time. We thank you all for coming. We will be hanging out here for a little while. If anyone has any particular questions or they want to make fun of us to our face, right over here. Thank you very much.